Yeah. he davened here. It was yesterday.
Last Shabbos.
No, I davened this morning.
Oh, he's here this morning.
Was this morning or yesterday?
I'm nervous about the election.
That's what he said?
Good morning.
Yes, see, look, you got a package deal.
I'll tell my wife, in case you don't recognize the guy comes home from school, it's me.
And you're Michelle Cooper, in the red? She's winning by about 200 votes. Okay, there you go.
It's gonna be tight.
Neck and neck. She's doing extremely well. I didn't expect her to do well.
Yeah, it's really 7 o'clock.
Not at all. So, mommy, she's having a major nail
Who? Don't be nervous. You're amongst friends.
What?
This is all friends. No, yeah, this is
just testing ground.
Nobody remembers what
Make a
you're
look
saying.
It's true.
It's 1965.
Unless I have to have a few good jokes. Then they'll remember the jokes. Yeah.
Very, very tough. She's sweating. She's sweating. I didn't think she had a chance because the last election between the Liberals and the NDP, they had 170%.
I heard on the
She only won
radio.
because it was split.
Yes, on the way here, I just heard on the radio that Bonnie Crombie may lose her own.
Yeah, that would be very easy because she's an anti-Zionist.
Dr. Chaim, can I give you a
Even
little
though
I can use one.
even though
Just a
her
little.
conservative opponent was caught in a very big scandal.
I don't even hear anything.
Her conservative opponent is the mother-in-law of Patrick.
Right, Patrick Brown.
Patrick Brown is the corrupt mayor of Brampton.
Right.
And who's running her campaign? City of Brampton employees are running her campaign.
Oh, boy.
And they found them. Rebels found them. So they're illegally using City of Brampton employees to run a
But
campaign office
if
for
they
his
do
mother.
it on their own time, they
They're
can
not
do
doing
it.
it on their own time.
How much is my figures now by 12,000, you said?
4,000.
4,000 now. Wow. He's projected to win also.
He'll win because there's 8 people running in that riding, so the vote split. It's in our riding where it's only 3 candidates.
That's mean.
Anyway, we want to welcome David Zolty to Tzeh Ulmad. It's not for Nahapachu that we invited Balabas to come give a shir. It's not because of that. He's not a Balabas.
Not a ball bus.
Akiva, are there any more chairs? Are there any
You
more
get a
chairs?
raise.
It's a machaber forum.
I know, it's Shabbos morning, when I know I'm coming to shul and I'm looking for topics to argue with people with, so I'm looking for a room with an argument. Everybody has seen that famous skit. You remember that famous skit from Monty Python? Is this the room for an argument? Maybe. What do you mean maybe, or yes or no? It can't be. Well, that's just being defined, it's not arguing. So you pick up simply pshat and it makes my hair sometimes stand the back. The questions are great, but the answer, because he restricts it specifically to pshat and he doesn't want to bring anything with drash. And we have an argument as to what is drash and what is pshat. It really brings the chumash to light. So
I have nothing against Rosh. Okay, it's just that.
They all say that.
But, you know,
So my best friends are Hasidim, I know. Lubavitch, I know, but it really is a pleasure to welcome to the Tzeh Ulmad table. You're gonna be in rotation. You'll be another one, right?
No, that goes-
Shaya Shachner is officially on. He's here. Hi, say hi, Shaya.
Hello.
Oh, it's not connected. I'm gonna have to make sure you hear it. 1 second. No, I brought it here. 1 second.
Okay, people really come for the kugel, don't they? If you cut out the kugel, what kind of a crowd would you get here?
We don't know.
What?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. We're gonna start now.
You only hear from me? Oh, you're belighting all the other people. who
Okay,
come.
Shai, you can hear a little better now? 1 second.
No, 352 to 504.
Let me test one more time.
I'm from 352 to 504.
Okay.
She's within the 150 votes. It's very tight. She's
That clear, Shai? You can hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Okay, very good. Okay. All right.
Take it away.
So it's sponsored by the Beis Medrash. Today's Kugel and the Zoomcast is sponsored by the Beis Medrash in honor of the upcoming bar mitzvah of Shimmy Enakar. Right? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, anybody who was at Friday night's Mincha last week gave a drasha, as he does usually, and he quoted a chazal, very unusual chazal that said, "La'ased lavai," there will be only one yontif. There won't be no Pesach, no Shavuos, no Sukkot, but one. You look like you recognize this.
No, I was there, but I didn't hear that.
You did.
I was looking at Yossi. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Well, I saw a few eyes drooping, and he said also, as far as Karbonis is concerned, there'll only be one carbon. No chatas, no, none of them
No
except a shlama, a taida, he says there'll be, and that's it. Now, that's a very radical idea, very extremely unusual. How's that possible? You have, we have this explicitly in the Torah. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And only one yontif, the yontif will be Purim. Purim is a d'Rabbanan d'Kayontif. How is it possible? No derises and only. Pardon me?
What's going to happen to Brist?
Brist. Hey, there you go. They'll have nothing to do. Okay, you know that joke. How many people learn in Mir? About half. Anyway, so how do we understand this? A d'Rabbanan d'Kayontif, and that's the one we keep, Lased Lavai. How should this be understood? And that's what I'm going to focus in the Purim part, not what do we do with the other Yom Tovim. That is a question in itself. But my issue, the one that I'm addressing, is why Purim? What is it about Purim? So we need some historical background. Most of you probably know the story of Purim happened after Churban Bayis Rishon and before the Chanukas Bayis Sheni. So in that short period of time, we don't know exactly how many years that is, but it's approximately 70. It depends where you count from. And I'll tell you in a minute why it's 70.
But it had to be towards the end, because that's why they made a mistake.
It had to be toward the end of that. But it happened in that period of time. So, so as far as historical background is concerned, it's already been 200 years since the Azara Shvatim have been captured, taken into captivity by Ashur, by the Assyrians. And little has been heard from them since, and it's assumed that they were assimilated into the host countries wherever they are, and now and this story of the Megillas Esther story happened, like you said, toward the end. So, but now by this time. It was Babel that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. They became the superpower. Ashur was the superpower earlier, and the Babylonians took the remnants of the two remaining tribes, which is Yehuda and Binyamin, and there are some people from Shevet Levi. Look at who we have here, a representative, and some Kohanim, and that's who was taken into Babel, into captivity. So, now, as you can imagine, the spirit of the Bnei Yisrael, whoever went, was very low. The Ruach, this is the first, what would we call it? The first Golus in 900 years for the Bnei Yisrael here, okay? But in spite of the fact that the Asar Shvatim were taken 200 years earlier, but 900 years is a very long time. So the Bnei Yisrael were very unsettled as far as how do you keep the mitzvahs in the Torah. everything in Eretz Yisrael revolved around the Beis Hamikdash, and there are many mitzvahs that were totally ba'aretz, and it was a very confusing and chaotic time for those captives in the Bnei in Bavel.
Any Jews in Eretz Yisrael?
A scattering of Jews. The lower classes, 900 years from the time, from the Mishkan was 400 years, the Beis Hamikdash 400 and change, and the Beis Hamikdash itself 400 and change.
They had a Beis Hamikdash 400 years.
400 years, they had a Beis Hamikdash, of course.
But the last one that went to Golus was Detroit.
900 years they were in Eretz Yisrael keeping the mitzvahs the way, I don't know.
They didn't have the experience that we have in Golus.
Yeah, we are accustomed to Golus, but they weren't. And this was before Tefillah was instituted. You have to remember, there was no such thing as Shachris, Mincha, and Marv. It didn't exist yet. What? Kiddush. Okay, I said the spirits were low, you know. Anyway, so the question is,
Zionistic mentality as opposed to a Golus mentality. They're going into Golus with a Israel mentality or a
yes, with an Eretz Yisrael mentality, they don't know what to do. And if you there's a Perek in Tehillim 137 that reflects these feelings. Al Nars Bavel Sham Yoshavnu Gam Bochinu Ech Noshir Es Shir Hashem Al Admas Necha. And you know the song?
Yeah, Ech Noshir.
Right. And by the rivers of Babylon.
Oh, by the rivers.
Right. Anyway.
That's what you're referring to.
Anyway, it's a famous Perek in Tehillim, and this reflects Al Nars Bavel Shom Yoshavnu Gam Bochinu, we were crying, Ech Noshir. How do we say, in other words, how do we do our mitzvah? How can we do anything? Our hands are tied, no Beis Hamikdash, no Eretz Yisrael. What do we do on this Admas Nechar? So, that was the problem. So, Bavel was eventually defeated by Paras. There was a nevuah, though, by Yirmiyah, that the Golus would last 70 years. When Achashverosh took over, he made a cheshbon that those 70 years had expired. And he was very excited about that, and he made a party for 127 Medinas. And the main party, though, was in the capital of Shushan. So they were, so the Bnei Yisrael, many of them had the same cheshbon. You know, his cheshbon, Achashverosh, was based on something, right? And many of the Bnei Yisrael had the same cheshbon. So whatever kept them going before that, there was a nevuah by Yirmiyah that the Golus would end in 70 years. Okay, well, however low their spirit was then, it went into a further all-time low. So much so that they were actually attended that party that Achashverosh made, and it's reported by Chazal, I think, that he came, that he displayed the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, as well as he wore the big day kahuna. So, and that the Bnei Yisrael attended that was too much for the Rebbeinu Shalom to seivel, and there was a gezerah that the Bnei Yisrael had to be wiped out.
The Nevuah had any part about when the Beis Hamikdash was going to be rebuilt? Because even if they got back there to Yisrael, it would be like, now there's no Beis Hamikdash. So there's no vision.
I think the issue was, when is Golus going to end? In other words, they can go to Yisrael, but there would have to be a period of construction.
Hundreds of years too, right? Shlomi took.
Yeah, it took time. So I don't know about that part of it. Anyway, so this was it, the gezerah that the Bnei Yisrael had to be destroyed, and Haman was the instrument that Ron Shalom used to start that process. And Haman said to Achashverosh, Yeshna am echad mefuzar v'no ami. There's one people that are scattered and dispersed among the nations. Chazal meant that that's a double lashon, and they understood that to mean that we're not only physically separated from one another, but they were spiritually separated. So this is an indication of the low spirit of Klal Yisrael, and Haman took advantage of this weakness, and he he did what the Megillah says he did. He did this gyro, and the rest is history. So the Bnei Yisrael, having lost all hope, they weren't paying attention to their leadership anymore. Okay, the Anshei Knesset Hagedola, it felt that they were the Anshei Knesset Hagedola, they were the leaders, and they're the ones that got them into this mess. And nothing that they did so far helped. And now there's a threat to their existence. So that was that. But when this Gezerah came, they had a change of mind. But the Hamoin Am and their hopelessness they didn't want any part of Yiddishkeit before that. But once the Gezerah came, they saw the severity of Haman's threat and realized that their own destruction was imminent, and that despite the Golus, they realized that Hashem still cared for them and valued their mitzvahs. So that's when the tshuva process began. They fasted. There was a kind of Esther asked them to fast. And they did tshuva. And I'm simplifying this. And the tshuva in Shushan was a 3-day fast. And God accepted the tshuva as sincere. And the Jewish people were saved by Haman. That's the historical background. So, what are the characteristics of this tshuva? How was it done exactly? So, Chazal point to there were 4 things that were done. 4 tikkunim, remedies, that Mordechai and the Anshei Knesset Hagedola established, and it was accepted by the Jewish people. And they are: 1, the 3-day fast that Esther requested; 2, the mitzvah shlach manos; 3, the mitzvahs of matos levianim; and 4, they instituted the holiday of Purim.
That was after.
After.
That was that part.
They did, okay, because the part of the tshuva was the fast. That was the first part, right? And it was a progression.
The tshuva
Yeah,
continued.
it was progression. And those 3, okay, I'll explain in a minute. Those 3, I'll tell you what, those 4, I'll tell you what they accomplished. So this 3-day fast was a tikkun for the Jewish participation in Achashverosh's party, right? That makes sense. One offsets the other, right? That's the tikkun for the disunity of the Bnei Yisrael from one another and from their cultural heritage, so to speak, from the Torah that they rejected, basically. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the institution and the acceptance, the kimu and the kiblu of the new holiday of Purim. So the institution by the Anshei Knesset Hagedola and the acceptance by the Hamon Am. And it can't be stressed enough what a radical idea it is to have a new holiday. So in the 900 years of Yiddishkeit, there was never a new holiday.
There was no yard there was no Yutas Kislev.
I just want to know if it was a paid holiday.
There could have been yard sites. I heard there were a few yard sites, but there was no new holiday instituted. And it was a radical idea, and there was.
Hanukkah was based on.
That's why I gave it.
It was later.
Background. Hanukkah didn't happen yet. A few hundred years later. Anyway, so this was such a radical idea. There was actually resistance among the Gedolim, but they were outvoted by the most of the Anshei Knesset Hagedola, because you can imagine that,
I can't believe
do you
that.
remember
It was
the
just.
Anayazach, those people who say, and that was an actual Anayazach.
Antichrist goes, okay, how could we get to like, okay, you're supposed to drink on this Yom Tov, it's supposed to party, so that.
Nice for the
Yeah. So,
Especially a holiday like this, so did they celebrate it the
They
next
never would have
year?
pulled it off.
In other words, right away to be so happy, even though they didn't have a Beis Hamikdash, to celebrate it with gusto.
They lived through a nace.
So they lived through a
that-
nace, right?
yes,
So the next year they
Israel was saved. What do you mean? There was a war. There was a massive war where the Jews wiped out all of the anti-Semites, all of the Hamasniks, and the
So who were the anti to the Yom Tov?
some Gedolim. They didn't believe that the Torah does not say anything about a new holiday. And right? Here we go. Anyway, so
The Megillus Tinius that was smaller, right? They had a lot of, no, but the Megillus Tinius brings up,
Small Yom Tov.
yeah, but
It wasn't like something.
no, but we don't teach that. We don't even, we barely know about it, right?
Celebrating, not today, not today.
The gold rule.
Anyway, but ultimately the Bnei Yisrael accepted it. And first of all, the Anshei Knesset Hagedola had to get themselves straight with it, and the Bnei Yisrael accepted it. So that was the kimu, and that was the kiblu, the acceptance by Klal Yisrael, by the Hamon Am. So this idea of kimu v'kiblu is very prominent in rabbinic Purim literature. This is probably one of the most important and focused that they instituted, and the Hamoin Am were makabel. So the Gemara in Shabbos talks about this and says kimu asher kiblu far. They establish what was already some time before accepted. And what was that? You talked, it was a Torah. They accepted the Torah, which they didn't fully do. That's what the Gemara says. So all the Meforshim, excuse me, I can take one of these. All of the Meforshim are very confused about this. What do you mean the Bnei Yisrael didn't? Thank you, I'll take that. The Bnei Yisrael didn't accept the Torah. There was, like I said, 900 years of Yiddishkeit. You're telling me they never fully accepted the Torah? So the Meforshim all take a stab at this. The Tanchuma says, and he tries to clarify, it says, it doesn't mean Torah Shabbat Peh, doesn't mean Torah Shabbat, it means Torah Shabbat Peh, that they never fully accepted Torah Shabbat Peh. This is also problematic. Tell you why. Because it's impossible to accomplish Torah Shabbat without Torah Shabbat Peh. The most fundamental things like Ein Tachas Ein. Was ever a case that Beis Din poked out somebody's eye? No, it was always, the Shabbat Peh was always there. How do we know what taitafos are? Okay, well, how do we know that there should be parshios in there, and which parshios? It's all Torah Shabbat Peh. Almost everything we do is influenced and interpreted by the Rabbanan, and that's Torah Shabbat Peh. So, I'm going to argue that we could perhaps add that the transmitters and the purveyors of Torah Shabbat Peh are none other than the rabbinic authorities, and in this particular case, it's the Anshei Knesset Hagedola. This is who we go to when we have a shaila, where we know how to do the halachas, right? So this is Torah Shabbat Peh, right? They control Torah Shabbat Peh, and they formulate Torah Shabbat Peh. You know, in different times, different shilas and different kashas. And just like the Anshei Knesset Hagedola, made this a new yontif. This was a Torah Shabbat Peh. This was a rabbinic yontif, and it was they who instituted it. So that the Jewish people accepted the authority of Anshei Hagedola, something that they didn't previously do. Okay, that was a really big deal, so much so that it was one of the tikkunim and part of the tshuva that that the Bnei Israel accomplished. And this kimu b'kiblu, this is what possibly could be meant by that they didn't accept, they didn't fully accept Torah Shabbat Peh. The interpretation could be that they didn't accept the Rabbanan's authority over, full authority over the Torah Shabbat Peh. So now.
So we'll trust you to interpret the Torah Shabbat, but not to completely innovate things.
Right. Right. So we have these four tikkunim that accomplished the full tshuva, and interestingly enough, a few short years later, the Bnei Israel was allowed to go back to Eretz Yisrael and build a second Beis Hamikdash. So now, I just want to read the last two paragraphs. I'm going to read this because I think it reads better than I could possibly say it. So here we go. The elements required for the Geula had now been realized through the tikkun process of tshuva. Indeed, just a few short years after the holiday of Purim was instituted, the Jewish people were allowed to return to the land of Israel and begin building the second Beis Hamikdash. The particular action of accepting the authority of the Anshei Hagedola may have been the watershed moment marking the transformation from the Judaism practiced in the land of Israel before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed to the Judaism practiced in Golus. Indeed, the institution of the holiday of Purim and its acceptance by the masses defined how they would practice their religion in the subsequent long period of Golus. The Anshei Hagedola would from this point on have the authority to substitute tefillah for the avod in the Beis Hamikdash and institute a myriad of other practices. And the measures introduced by the Anshei Hagedola actually saved Yiddishkeit and allowed it to survive and thrive throughout the long Golus to come. The genius of the Anshei Hagedola is evident in the new model of Yiddishkeit that they created, which we still follow today, 2,500 years later. And it was Purim and the tikkun of kimu v'kiblu that made all this possible. Now, let us return now to the question of why Chazal suggested that lots of Lovei Purim will be the only yontif. When the final Geula comes, Chazal say the accompanying miracles will be so great that those of the first Geula, which was Yetzias Mitzrayim, will pale in comparison, and the great events of the final Geula will be celebrated exclusively. So, and what will make the final Geula possible? Perhaps it will be the same thing that made the previous Geula possible, the acceptance by the masses of the authority of the rabbinic leadership. Maybe the message Chazal was sending us is that the event of Purim will be the model and roadmap for the final Geula. Do you think any rabbis would object to that idea?
The only thing they would argue about is who is that rabbinical authority?
It's not.
Who is that rabbinical
The
authority?
Knesset.
I'll tell you, the only problem is that it was the rabbinical authority saying, listen to me.
Trust me.
Preaching to the
But they
choir.
accepted it.
They
It's not like, it's just like a
accepted
rebbe.
it, and that's it. And
Rebbe
ultimately,
can say-
so you can call this feature over here,
Yeah.
we want Mashiach now. Okay.
But if you say Knesset, then go, so does that mean the Knesset is a Knesset? That's what you're referring to?
No.
They did such a good job teaching them how to live in Golus, they didn't want to go back. People didn't want to go back.
There's something.
You can't say Anai
Very nice, very nicely done, very nice, beautiful.
Dave, right? So Anai Zach is a good
I
thing.
have what I think is a stupid question. I don't have what the whole problem with Purim was. Achashverosh made a gzera that all the goyim can attack us,
Right.
right? And then how did he reverse it? He said we can fight back. Otherwise, we wouldn't have fought back.
Yeah, okay, so there's an answer to that.
We're not going to fight. Achashverosh shouldn't fight back. Come kill me.
Okay, so they could fight back, but the authority of the Malchus was behind the Jews right now. Okay?
What does that mean? They actually had the army helping them?
No, Trump was on their
Yeah,
side.
the police was on their side, let's put it that way. The
Okay,
police
so
was
originally
on their
the
side,
police would be on the goyim side.
right,
So,
and now the police were on the Jews.
so we would get arrested for disturbing the peace, and they wouldn't.
That's right.
And now they get arrested. Because if you read the actual Megillah, it sounds like they had permission to kill us, and Achashverosh couldn't rescind that because it was Tavas Melech. I'll just make a clear that you could defend yourself.
It was another executive order.
That was a big deal.
But I guess I don't understand.
Defend yourselves.
Otherwise, the police would not have let them defend themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you couldn't defend yourself.
Did they also?
To arm yourself to defend yourself.
They also out the firearms.
Did they outlaw fire?
They had a registry.
Yeah, okay. By the way, there was a period in that. where
But
they
you got a
outlawed-
question here.
The crowd.
Go ahead.
Dave?
Hey,
Yes, Johnny Goldharp from Sultana Avenue. Go ahead, you're on the air.
We're right on Shabbos. We're facing each other. Okay, it's interesting that you can draw. There I am. Yeah, it's interesting that the Matan Torah. There were two Matan Torahs, right? The first and the second. Okay, and the
you mean two
two luchos, yeah.
You
Yeah,
mean
two
two luchos?
two luchos. There's now
Okay.
two Beis Hamikdash. Okay, and so you've got the
Right.
so the first one, first Matan Torah, the first luchos were basically given by the Rabbeinu Shloim.
Now, is there a
Yes,
question
you know,
there somewhere?
Dave, you know, there's always a question in here. The second luchos there was an alteration there. So the first one was sort of an absolute from the Rebbeinu Shloim. Second, there was some alterations there to give a little, I guess, a little wiggle room for whatever the reason there was some changes.
Right. You got to get
The
to the
Beis
point.
Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash was again that had the everything in there, the Aron, everything was there. That was the perfection one.
Johnny wants a slut. Give him a slut.
The second Beis Hamikdash did not have that absolute perfection in it. It's that interval, and you're telling me that it's the interval between the two Beis Hamikdash when Purim occurred. When we came down from Moshe Rabbeinu the second time, he was one who was now the interpreting or the middleman between the Rabbeinu Shloim and the people. The same thing that's happening here in terms of the two Beis Hamikdash is in Purim. You're saying the Anshei Hagedola became the spokesperson or the interpreter to the for the people. So I think it's interesting that it's the interval between the two that the spokespeople came into an existence, and this allowed for the continuation of the Jew in the development of the Jews. So it's just an interesting observation.
It's a comment or a question?
It's a comment. It's a comment in terms of and basically enhancing what you're suggesting.
It's the quiet period that allowed.
Shai Shechner to sign up, but he also wanted to thank you for give you.
Dave Shkoyach.
Okay.
Really Shkoyach. Very nice.
Did you want to hear a replay of the shir, Dr. G, or you?
I heard the whole
most of
thing.
it?
There was,
You heard the whole. Oh, I saw iPhone 5. Okay.
Eye for an eye. Most
Yeah.
people know, we don't do that, but there's still some people not that long ago that held an eye for an eye. Like
The Karaites.
Wise guy, right? They held an eye for an eye.
Right from the Three
So,
Stooges.
is it possible though that they believed maybe in the pshat, but not in the authority that they have? I mean, that's really what you're getting at. So no, there's eye for an eye when they said it means money. So they accepted it because it made sense to them. They didn't accept it because it was authority.
How do you explain Tetifos? Meaning, why would you put?
No, but also the Tzdukim, it's the same thing.
I know. I don't see how they can keep a religion that's Tzdukim. The Tzdukim weren't as rigid as you thought. I did a paper.
What do you mean? As Michigan? No, I don't think they were that Michigan.
No, but they weren't as literal as you thought.
Oh, they weren't simply shot people.
Simply shot isn't literal.
No, I
Simply,
understand.
even in simply pshat, I argue that not everything could be reduced to pshat. I give multiple examples that you need drash.
I'm just, there's comedy and extremism, that's all. I'm just taking it to the extreme to be able to do it. But I'm saying from the perception of that they didn't believe in the authority, they had a Kohen Gadol.
No, in this period of time, they for sure didn't believe they didn't follow the Anshei Knesset. They thought that, I don't think I mentioned this, that the covenant, the bris, was no longer binding, right? The bris of the Torah, the bris ben Absarim was no longer binding in Golus.
Once they got into Golus.
Yeah, no longer binding.
After the Morado.
Yeah.
That's what Slovka had to make an example.
Right, so it was no.
Yeah. So let's finish the thought before because it was.
Yeah, so they thought it was no longer binding. Okay, the Torah was no longer. It was
Anshei said that it's still binding.
So they were trying to bring in tefillah. They were trying to substitute things and for the way it was and the right. The Hamoinam wasn't listening. They wanted no part of it. All right, listen, it's over. Okay, Yiddishkeit is over. It can only be done in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, don't give me these naya zachen, okay, like a new holiday, a new this, a new that. Okay, it's over. I'm living in Yehupitz over there.
More than 80% of the Jews disappeared. Right? If you're looking at the last 200, that means 80% disappeared, right? They all went to India.
Right, that's right. And that was a threat, that they would disappear also. That was a possibility before this gezerah that Haman had, okay? And after that, all of Yiddishkeit flowed from that. We had the second base of Mikdash, Chanukah Sabbath, a lot of things changed. This was still the time of the Nevi'im during the Megillah period, right? But after the Chanukah by Sheni, that was the end of Nevuah, end of the type of Avodah Zarah. We just learned this in the Daf, right? And a lot of things changed. The nature of the universe really changed from that period of time when that.
Was the second base of Mikdash also based tefillah kol ha'amim the way the first one was? Remember, the first base of Mikdash was a center of what's the word, monotheism in the world, right? Was the second base of Mikdash carry that same power? It doesn't seem that it did.
I don't think it did, but you have to remember, during the first base of Mikdash, the Jews flirted with Avodah Zarah all the time, okay? So there were constant problems with Avodah Zarah, all right? Second base of Mikdash, there were almost no problems with Avodah Zarah. It was just, first base of Mikdash, it was corrupt, right? There were Adam ben Chavero problems, right? Right, those were the main issues. So how do you account for that? You see, a change must have happened, right, some.
We learned
you
from
know,
the daf. They davened
yeah.
for the.
Right.
So that was the getting rid of the Yetzer Hara.
But was it the same center?
Yeah, but that we
Okay,
also
that's
learned
what I
that the
wanted
This
to
Yetzer Hara-
center,
But we also
you know,
learned that the Avodah Zarah was only it was a decoy for Gilei Aroi.
that's,
I'm working on next.
that
I don't
could,
have-
they both could have been, both could have been true at the same time. For some people, it was only a decoy.
I think the Gilei Aroi still stayed, but the second base.
Huh? Basically, yeah, but that wasn't an issue.
Where is he? It wasn't an issue.
It was, in other words, the first base of Migdash, Chazal say, Gilei Shvichazam Avodah Zarah, right?
I know that,
Second base of
among
Migdash,
others.
it was, what do they call it, Bein Norach
So they
Lavera,
don't,
but what do they call it?
Sign order is on Shabbos.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no talk about Gila Raya